really 4 ways to be fully engaged here at TCAT. Joining a group, which you've obviously already done, serving on a team, giving a percentage, and inviting a friend. Today, we're going to talk about giving. Now look, we know it can be awkward to talk about giving money to a church, especially when you're watching a video created by the church. We get it, but we want you to give because it makes you a partner in our mission to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. But more importantly, we also know it's good for you. It actually grows your relationship with God. Drew Oakley will explain more about this in this message about being wise and generous with your money.
Let me ask you a question. Has your desire for something ever caused you to do something you regret? In other words, has there ever been something in a time in your life when there's something you desired to have that you did not have, but then all of a sudden you decided you had to have it, and then once you got it, it created regret? Put it one more different way. In other words, it became a moment where desire for something became devotion to something. You had to have it because you didn't have it, and then you got it, and then you regret it. Have you ever done that before? Probably, of course you have, because this is kind of part of the human condition. And Jesus is actually smarter than you think he is, because he talked a lot about this very thing. And I think this whole behavior, this whole tendency, this whole temptation is really wrapped up in the beginning. It begins and founds in one simple word, and it's this word, discontentment. All this stuff starts in discontentment. Discontentment is that you look at something and you realize it's something you don't have, or you look at something and you realize it's something that you should or you don't, and this comparison begins to happen between you and that thing. In other words, discontentment begins with awareness. If for anybody who's an Apple owner or Apple user, you know that every time the new iPhone comes out and there's a new number next to the same model, you have to have it because somebody else has it and you don't. Or the next time a new iPad comes out, or so on and so forth. Awareness creates discontentment. Do you understand that, right? Awareness of something that you don't have creates this feeling inside of you that you must have it. And honestly, this leads to significant problems in all of our lives. See, Jesus spent so much time, I think, talking about money and talking about the way in which we should look at our finances because he knew these kinds of temptations existed in us. He knew this was a part of our condition, and that all of our kind of the stemming from the center of many of our problems would be this word, discontent. I'm just not happy with what I have. And here's what's really interesting. For those of us that have worked, or you find yourself in the room this morning and you're like, I've earned and I've grown my career and I've worked and worked and worked. It seems like there just doesn't seem to be enough that you can earn that removes this from your equation. Does that make sense? There's always something else. There's always something else. And so Jesus knew there would always be something else, and he said, look, I just want you to be aware. I just want you to be aware that when you become aware of things you don't have, you're going to be tempted to want them. And for some of us, listening to the sound of my voice today, this has created significant problems for us. There's another word. When we start talking about finances and understanding money in general, there's another word that kind of comes up a lot, and it's a word that none of us are, and it's the word greed. It's this word right here. Greed is something you can't see in the mirror, just so you know. Greed is something that you can't see in the mirror. You'll never see it in the mirror. But the truth be told, welcome to church, I'm really sorry, but most of us are greedy people. We are greedy. And the reason is because greed is defined by Jesus as not necessarily maybe the way that you would define it. He just simply says it's the assumption. All right, these are Jesus' words, not mine. It's really the assumption that it's all for my consumption, that when something gets placed in my hands, when I end up with some piece of resource, that the reason it's here and the reason I have it is because it's been given to me just for me. And if that's who you are and that's what your understanding of things are, well, then Jesus would say that that's actually greed. And gosh, that sounds harsh, right? Especially when we think about our culture. And, I grew up in America just like most of the rest of you all did, or maybe you're still currently in that, or maybe you moved in from another country and you're still trying to kind of figure it all out. But all of us have this sense that I have to work and work and work for mine. And when I get mine, this doesn't mean we're not generous. We just go things like, oh, you know what, here, I'm just so grateful for you that you can have this. And you should be grateful too, because I don't have to give you this. This is just something I've chosen to do at this moment. And Jesus would say that that's kind of this misunderstanding of stuff. That we have a misunderstanding of our stuff. And it begins with this assumption that it's all for our consumption. Now, when you talk about money at all, there's one more kind of not nice word that we have to mention before we can kind of come to an understanding of what it is that Jesus actually said that we should think about our goods and our money and our finances and all those things. One more word, and none of us like it. It's this word. Debt. What a wonderful word, right? It's one of those words that just evokes peace in us, right? Don't you just feel so excited when you hear that word? Probably not, right? This is not something that brings any of us joy, but here's the crazy thing. Debt has become this thing that we do that's just normal. We've normalized it for all of ourselves. And debt, literally by definition, means that you have something that you are enslaved to until the debt is paid. That you have given over part of yourself for something else, and that has to be repaid in order to keep the something else that you've handed it over for. Let me put it to you this way. We shouldn't trade. Don't trade your peace for something that can't bring you peace, because that's really what happens when we take on debt. When we take on debt, we're trading our current peace for something we think will bring us peace in the future, but is going to rob us of our peace in the process of paying for the thing we hope brings us peace. It doesn't bring us peace. It doesn't create any joyful feelings inside of us. But for some reason, we've just kind of created this cycle where we drive down the road and we see that thing and we're like, you know what, I would love to lease one of those, or I would like to own one of those, or it's fascinating. Here's what's really interesting to me, going back to the awareness thing for a minute, because it's all tied together. We have this tendency to be scrolling through our social media, and there's an ad for something that pops up that we just had no idea even existed. And within 30 seconds, we are checking out in a cart with that thing we didn't even know existed 30 seconds ago because we had to have it. Even if we didn't think that, our life was meaningless before we had this thing that we had to buy off of social media that we just found. And then we got to go explain it to our spouse. Well, I know you want a grocery money, but look how this is going to change our lives. And this is kind of how we live right now. This is kind of a normal thing in our society, that just continue to throw things out, hoping it's going to bring us happiness into our current presence. And the truth is, it's not bringing us happiness, it's not bringing us peace, because it's robbing those things from us in the future. And Jesus talked all about this. Right? Let me throw all these three words up on the screen so we can just take a look at these in general just for a minute. Okay, so we got discontentment, greed, and debt. Let me ask you a question. How much of these provide you happiness? How much, let me put it to you a different way. How much, this is what's so fascinating about these things. How much money would you have to make to stop being discontent? The truth is, there is no amount of money, because there's no way that these don't equate together. It's not about how much money you have, it's about awareness of things you don't have. Let me ask it to you a different way. How much money would you have to make to eliminate greed from your life? Well, the truth is, there is no amount of money that would eliminate greed from your life, because if you look at it as just consuming things that are belonging to me, right? If that's the definition, that it's all for me, then there is no amount of money that comes your way that will actually eliminate greed from your life. The only thing that combats these three things is management. It's thinking critically about your finances. It's thinking critically about the stuff that comes into your life. And this is not a message about stuff being a bad thing, okay? That's not what I'm saying. That's not the point of what I'm trying to get across to you. The problem is how that stuff controls us. And Jesus talked all about this. In fact, he gave us an example, and this is why we're talking about this in the first place. Jesus said, look, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. And discontentment and greed and debt are a way in which we enslave ourselves to our money. We have made ourselves servants of our finances rather than servants of God who have a financial part of their life. And Jesus knew how tempting this was going to be. It's fascinating that this is the one that he threw up there, isn't it? That there would be a competition for who needs to sit on the throne of your life, or who needs to sit in the lordship of your life. And he knew that the number one competition between him and us was going to be money. And if you take, here's what I love. If you take everything that Jesus said about finances, which is a lot, he talks about this a lot throughout the New Testament. If you take everything that Jesus said about finances through the New Testament, and everything that Jesus read about finances through the Old Testament, everything that you come to understand about the Jewish scriptures and everything that it says about finances and money in that respect, you can actually boil all that down to two words. You can take everything that Jesus said and everything that the Old Testament says and boil it down to really just two words that encompass all of that. And it's this: generosity and wisdom. Being generous and being wise with what you have. Being generous and being wise with what you have. Now, you think about the people who you know in your life who are happiest. You think about the people you know in your life who are happiest. I'm going to guess that with their money, they are both generous and wise. And they may not have as much as you, right? They may not have as much as you. They may not work as hard as you. They may not have as big of a paycheck or a big of a 401k. They may not have a boat in their driveway. They might not have an RV that they've only driven once and parked in some sort of, collection agent's area, right? They may not have any of that stuff. But for some reason, they just seem to be happy when it comes to their finances. You just can't figure it out. Well, in the center of that, there probably is generosity and wisdom. Let me see if I can put this to you a different way. See, there's 3 words that I have been taught, and this is not something that I learned, growing up. It's something that I had to figure out along the way. It is something that I've read, and I've studied a lot of other people, and so I'm not taking credit for what I'm about to tell you. I'm just telling you because I've heard it and it works. There's really 3 words that if we could center our financial lives on these 3 words, we would find ourselves happy and content with our financial state. That it would actually be in a way that would start to create happiness in us based on the way we relate to our finances. It's a way to unhitch ourselves from the slavery of our finances and to move in a different direction to understand stuff the way God understands stuff. And it's these 3 words: give, save, live. Give, save, and live. In other words, when you receive money, when money comes your way, the very first thing you do is you give. And the reason is because it's a way for you to go, listen, I know that the temptation for me is to say all this stuff is mine. And stuff, you want to tell me that you're in charge and that I now have this and I need to spend it the way you tell me to. But listen, just so you know that I serve God, I don't serve you, I'm going to take some of you and I'm going to give it away right at the beginning. See, there I go. And Jesus said that. If you would just start at the beginning, right, the very beginning of what comes in, you just give that away. Then the next thing you should do is you save. You create savings. You put money aside, right? And you say, I don't have to spend all of this. I have it, and I have the capacity to spend it all, but I don't have to spend it all because there is more going on in my future than right now, than the thing that I see that I think I have to have, that I've become aware of all of a sudden that I didn't have 30 seconds ago. I'm going to save. And then you live on the rest. Here's why this works. Here's why this works. Again, it's not my model. I just think it's awesome and it's perfect. Here's why this works. Because every single time you give, it brings joy. Every single time you give, it brings joy. You know this, right? It brings joy to see that you've taken something that was in your possession and been able to give it to someone else. In fact, in the times when I've been in the worst debt in my life, in the times when financial stability just seemed like the furthest thing from my mind, I so desperately wanted to have money that I could give away. I so desperately wanted to be in a place where I could give it away because I knew it would bring me joy, but I wasn't in a place that I could. And I hate that season of my life. I hate that season of my life. The other thing that I know is that when you save, it brings you what? Peace, right? It brings you peace. When you're able to put money aside, it actually brings you peace of mind. You know that? When you save money and you're able to put it aside, it brings you peace of mind because you don't have to worry about the dryer dying next week and not knowing what to do about it. You don't have to worry about some calamity coming down your way and not being able to solve it. It brings you peace. And when you live on what's left, it brings you freedom. When you're driving down the road and you go, I could buy that car over there, but I don't have to. I could lease one of those, but I don't have to. I could borrow enough money to live in that, but I don't have to. It just suddenly brings you this freedom. You feel completely free because you're not enslaved to your finances anymore. And this is why when Jesus taught about finances, and he outlined these 3 things, he knew how we were going to relate to the stuff that could potentially come our way, and he knew what the temptation would be, and he knew what would get us out of it was to go, that's not your master. That's not your master. There's more to this. This is how you make your money make you happy. This is it. It's not by making more of it, because again, let me think of it this way. How much discontentment, how much discontentment can bring you joy? And what about, is greed and peace and are they the same thing? Like how greedy do you have to be to finally get peace? It doesn't work that way. But on the other hand, when Jesus says when you give and you save and you live, when you live in that process, it actually brings you freedom. Now, one more thing, and then I'm done. One more thing. Can you imagine what your life would be like currently if you were able to shape your finances in this direction. Can you imagine what it might feel like if you weren't clouded over with debt, if you weren't clouded over with discontentment, if you weren't clouded over with greed, if those big kind of temptations weren't just lording over you in your life? Can you imagine what the freedom could feel like in your life if you lived on a basis of giving first, saving second, and living on the rest?
So money won't make you happy or unhappy. Your happiness is determined by how well you manage what you have. Money can contribute to your happiness if you manage it well. And part of managing it well is being generous. That's the direction that Jesus leads us. And it's not because he wants something from us, but because he wants something for us. If you're interested in engaging with the church by becoming a percentage giver, it's really just a 3-step process. Decide, commit, and give. After you've decided and committed to giving, it's time to move, and you'll be amazed at how radically it grows your faith in God. Now, you and your group will talk more about giving, and your leader will take it from here.